This is a continuation of the quest of Saint Nicholas. Chapter 8. The Battle with the Knights of the Ice. The team of reindeer, led by the stag, swiftly traveled north for a number of days, driven with a seemingly supernatural endurance and speed. They barely ever stopped to rest. As the scenery flew by, the landscape became rocky and barren, and trees grew more and more sparse, until there was nothing but rocky hills, snow, and ice. The stag and reindeer slowed the pace of the sleigh as the land grew steeper and even rockier, till they traveled at a slow trot, and eventually they could travel by sleigh no more. "We will have to travel the rest of the way by foot," said Prudy. They got out of the sleigh, leaving it and the team of animals to await their return. As they walked, Spez, the elf maiden who was the archer of the group, and therefore who had the best eyes, pointed to a distant mountain peak. "There is our goal, the cave of the Krampus." The company was heartened by this news, their goal finally in sight after so many days of travel in only a vague direction. Their hearts lightened with a renewed sense of energy. However, soon their progress slowed down again as great clouds filled the sky, surging up a blizzard. The winds whipped the snows around them, as if the weather itself intended to drive them back. But thanks to the encouraging words of the sharp-eyed Spez, they kept pressing on without losing hope. When the snow became so strong they could barely see, Prudy suggested they form a line and put their hands on the shoulder of the one in front of them, so they would not get separated. Fiddy took the front of the line and used her large round shield as a wind block. It was now only by Fiddy's guidance that they walked, now not by sight, for they could barely see. At last they came upon a dark opening of a gloomy cave. "Here is the door of the Krampus," said Prudy, adjusting his spectacles. Just then, as if on cue, the wind and snow changed directions. It immediately swirled in front of the entrance of the cave until it seemed all the blizzard was but a concentrated vortex of icy chaos in front of the cave. As the snow swirled, it began to solidify, forming frozen figures before them. It was as if the whole blizzard had reformed itself into terrible ice creatures, 7 armored warriors looking as if they and their armor were made completely out of ice. Their armor and weapons looked wicked as they were lined and covered with spicy icicles. These crystalline creatures crackled in the whipping winds. "This certainly is wicked work and dark magic of the cruel Krampus," said Fiddy. An ice-cold dread gripped Nicholas, nearly as freezing as those fierce frozen ferocities which he now faced. "Take heart," said Fort, the tall and brawny elf, as he drew out his large hammer, while Justin drew his mighty sword. "For we are trained warriors, and we have faced such ferocious fiends before." Nicholas remembered the words of the Moon Maiden. "As the story of the king was told in 4 words, that is the 4 Gospels, so I give to you 4 words from the Word made flesh to guide and strengthen you for this journey. And each word is connected to the saving sacrifice of the Incarnate One. The 4 words, a circlet, a sign, a spear, and a song. Remember her 4 words, for these will give you strength to fight," Nicholas reminded himself. First, a circlet. Nicholas looked down at the wreath of holly ringing his left arm. He held it up in his left hand, and as he looked at it, thought of the second word. A sign. At the crossroads, follow the cross. Remembering how the stag with the glowing cross between its antlers had faithfully guided them on their journey thus far, Nicholas made the sign of the cross in prayer. As he did so, a wondrous thing happened. The circlet of holly he held in his hand glowed with a silvery light and was transformed. No longer did he hold in his hand a ring of holly, but a great round shield. The shield was of a silvery metal, edged with a metallic wreath of shining emeralds and rubies, in the shape of holly leaves and berries. In the center of the shield was a glowing golden cross. "The shield of faith," observed Fiddy, smiling, holding up her own shield as she stood next to Nicholas. He strapped the shield on his left arm, and, remembering the third word of the Moon Maiden, he looked at his sacred spear in his right hand, the bleeding lance of St. Longinus that had pierced the side of the Incarnate One, and had embedded in its shaft a sliver of the true cross of the king. All the elves drew their weapons too, and stood in a formation, preparing to charge the wicked ice warriors who stood before them. Fiddy, with her great shield, and the brawny Fort with his great warhammer, stood in the front, shoulder to shoulder. Then Prudy and Temps stood behind them, their walking sticks now topped with spearheads made of the same silvery metal as Nicholas's shield. Justin stood in the center behind them, his mighty sword drawn. Nicholas stood in the back with Carrie and Spez on either side of him. Spez already had knocked a golden feathered arrow on her longbow. Nicholas, looking at Carrie, saw she had no weapon. "Carrie, how are you going to fight? Also, how am I to fight? I am but an old man and do not have training with weapons." Carrie smiled a warm smile to him. Now, Nicholas, is the time for you to learn the meaning of the fourth word the Moon Maiden spoke of, the song. The song she spoke of is my own song, the song of Caritas. My weapon is the song that I sing. Listen for my song, for that is what guides the strikes and blows of these warriors, and that is what will guide your strikes. If you listen to my song, then you will know the dance, and will dance in the battle with us 7 servants of the Moon Maiden. It is the song of Caritas that unites us and holds together we 7 servants of the Moon Maiden. It is the song that makes us such valiant warriors, and when you listen to the song and allow it to surge in your heart, that is where you also will find the strength to fight. For you see, this battle is not won by physical strength. Now go to battle and listen for my song." With that, Fort gave a fierce battle cry, and raising his great warhammer, he and Fiddy charged. Prudy and Temps, brandishing their spears, were close at their heels. Justin majestically drew his sword, and with a great sense of powerful purpose, boldly walking after them, then struck with the mighty sword. It was beautiful to watch the 5 little elves fight together. Despite their small stature, they now looked like graceful and majestic warriors from the tales and legends of old. They fought together, their movements perfectly coordinated, almost as if in a beautiful dance. Fiddy seemed to know just when to block the blows of one of the terrible ice creatures. There they were a silvery swirl of shield, sword, spears, and hammer. Fiddy seemed to know just when to block the blows of one of those ice creatures and would move her shield just in time for another to strike with weapons. In the middle of these terrible ice creatures, they were a silvery swirl of shield, sword, spears, and hammer. All the while from afar, Spez shot a steady stream of arrows, flaming with a golden, fiery light. Where she got the fire, Nicholas didn't know, for it seemed to simply magically appear just before she shot her arrow. "Go now, Nicholas," Carrie said, smiling. "Fear not, for my song will guide you." Carrie then began to sing one of her beautiful, haunting songs that stirred something in the very depths of Nicholas's soul. And as he turned and charged into the battle, he didn't hear the song audibly in his ears, but from within. "Listen to my song," said the voice of Carrie in his mind. and as he joined the fray, the song of Caritas guided his movements. Though the words were in no language he understood, somehow he knew when and where to strike from the melody of the song. Right, left, behind you, 3 slashes this way, now block that way. Now step forward, now step back. And Nicholas listened more closely to Carrie's song in his heart and was swept up in it. His attacks with the elves became ever more effective. The rhythm of the Song of Caritas coordinated their fight while keeping them 1 step ahead of the enemy's attacks. Nicholas's strikes and blocks with his spear and shield joined in the other elves' furious dance of battle. And as Nicholas struck one way, one of the elves or arrows would strike another. And so, that holy knight of the Incarnate One, with his holly-ringed golden cross shield of faith and his sacred spear, the Santa Nicolaus himself became a rhythmic blur with his elven warriors, and together, by the strength of the Song of Caritas, they battled until the Krampus's wicked knights of ice collapsed and dissolved back into snow and shattered ice upon the ground. Chapter 9. The Cave of the Krampus. Nicholas and the elves looked into the entrance of the dark cave. "Nicholas," said Carrie, "this is the cave of the Krampus. His wicked works and deceptive dark magic is strong here, as this is where he resides. His deception is so strong that when you enter this cave, it will seem as if you are completely alone. You will no longer be able to see us. It will even be hard to hear us, but in the midst of all his deception and darkness, always listen to my song. And take heart, knowing we are with you every step of the way." With that, Nicholas stepped into the cave. He had only walked a few steps when already the light from the front entrance seemed a long way off. And he looked around and saw nothing of the elves. He trusted in Carrie's words, but he did certainly feel like he was completely alone. The cave opened up into a long hallway of twisted, wicked-looking stone columns. Between each of these columns were large sheets of ice from floor to ceiling. These sheets of ice were so smooth and reflective, it was as if the hallway were a great hall of mirrors. While the hallway was dark and dim, there was enough light, though he didn't know where it came from, that he could see his reflection in the ice mirrors. He slowly made his way down the hallway, using the sacred spear as a walking stick. The only sound was his breathing and the echo of his footsteps. But soon there were strange things moving in the reflections, not moving with him, but independently. He looked more closely and saw different scenes that unfolded before him. And what did these scenes show? They showed Nicholas, but played before him all the times in his life when he'd felt he had failed. Moments when he'd felt sorry. Moments that he regretted. Moments when his selfishness or impatience was greater than his love. He saw scenes of people he tried to help who went back to their own destructive ways. People who refused to accept his help, or who refused to believe that they were loved. Some scenes had happened in the past, but many scenes had not yet come to be. They were scenes of Nicholas's fears, of what he was afraid would happen to the people he loved, the people he cared for, the people he had tried to help. Fears of what could become. Fears that all his life and work had been a failure and had not helped anybody or made any difference. He saw many scenes of children from many places of times yet to come. Young children who had already experienced so much hurt and darkness, who had already lost hope and joy in life. He saw the way their hurt led to hurting others as they grew, and the wicked people they might become. He saw the ripple effects of evil and darkness throughout lives and generations unfold all before him. He saw generations of children growing to adults who lost all their faith, hope, and love, who no longer pursued or believed in goodness, truth, or beauty. He now felt the tremendous weight of this darkness that seemed to be settling upon the world. It seemed so much bigger and greater than himself. He seemed so small and weak compared to the power of this terrible darkness and evil. What could he possibly do? He was but one man, and a weak old man at that. Why did he try to fight back this darkness? It was like trying to hold back a great tidal wave with your bare hand. His heart ached and broke for all those he saw. He felt their pain and suffering, and was helpless in the face of it. He collapsed to the ground, weak, helpless, and on the verge of despair. "Nicholas, listen for my song," whispered a distant voice. But he knew the voice. It was Carrie. And so in the midst of the swirling noise of fear, doubt, helplessness, and temptations, and the despair in his heart, he listened. He tried to tune out all of the noise of his fear and go deeper into his heart to listen. He heard a faint tinkling of bells, and music, and a familiar voice, and a song that stirred his heart and souls to his depths. The song of Caritas, though it seemed distant, was still enough to surge a new strength in him. He stood up, leaning on his spear, and along with the melody of the song, he began to pray. He then heard the voice of Fiddy praying with him, and for him, to the incarnate light, to the King who had himself entered into this very darkness, becoming weak and helpless in the center of it all, and had done so while writing and singing the song of Caritas. And that had made all the difference. Nicholas walked farther down the hallway, and with every step, strength surged in him, and the light of the golden cross on his shield of faith grew. The images in the reflections grew more and more faint, less real. It was like when you wake up from a very bad dream. While you are in the dream, the things seem so real and terrifying. Yet when you wake up and look at the sunlight, the bad dreams seem so much farther away and much less real. So too were the scenes, images, and visions in the Hall of Mirrors to Nicholas. Finally, he reached the end of the evil hall of ice mirrors, and the passage opened up to a huge cavernous room with a high ceiling. Large stalactites and icicles hung from the ceiling and grew from where the floor and the walls met. These walls were also covered with sheets of ice, creating more ice mirrors. Children in chains stared at the ice mirrors, with sad or distant looks in their eyes. The spell of the ice mirrors had lost its hold on Nicholas, so they looked again to him like normal sheets of ice. But he knew the children were seeing scenes and images of their doubts and fears, scenes of darkness and despair. None of them seemed to even notice Nicholas come in. In the middle of the room was a great cauldron over a fire, and within the cauldron stood 3 children. They also looked off into the distance, seeming to stare at nothing. They did not seem to notice or care about the fire underneath their cauldron. And at the far side of the cavernous room stood a large stone throne, covered in stony spikes and icicles, and in it sat a large figure, at least a couple of heads taller than Nicholas, even while seated. He was covered in a dark hooded cloak, so Nicholas could not see his face. Next to the throne stood Basilios, holding an ornate black stone cup for the hooded figure, who took it and drank some, and then handed it back to Basilios. Basilios, too, had the same sad, distant look as the other children. "Basilios!" cried Nicholas. But he did not even seem to hear or take any notice of Nicholas. Then a raspy and wicked voice came from the dark-robed figure on the throne. "So, Nicholas, you've come to take away my favorite cupbearer and my servants, have you?" "Yes," said Nicholas, boldly to the figure that he knew to be Krampus. "I have come to safely return home these children you stole." "That I stole?" asked the Krampus in a mocking voice. "Why, Nicholas, I stole not one of them. They each willingly came with me. They were not wanted where they were, so I offered them a place here with me where they are wanted." He let out another cruel laugh. "There is only one person here who is not wanted here, and that is you, Nicholas. I will only command you once to leave now, and if you do not leave, then I will have to make you leave. But if you resist, I will have to destroy you." "I am not leaving without Basilios and the rest of these children." Basilios and a few of the other children now turned and looked at Nicholas, but they stared blankly, without emotion. Basilios did not seem to recognize Nicholas at all. "Basilios," Nicholas said again, rushing over and kneeling in front of him. He gently took Basilios's chin and turned up his face to look him in the eyes. Nicholas was shocked by how cold Nicholas's face felt, and he now noticed that Basilios's skin, and that of all the children, had a bluish-white tint to it, as if they were becoming a part of the snow and ice. "Basilios, we must go. Your parents have been worried sick about you. They love you and miss you. I've come to take you home, Basilios. It's me, Papas Nicholas." A flicker of recognition came over Basilios's face, and his face regained some of its color. "Nicholas?" he said, a little confused, like he was waking up from a dream. Some of the other children around the room began to stir, as if they were waking up and realizing where they were. A low growl came from beneath the Krampus's dark hood, and he stood and shoved Nicholas back. "Since you seem so stubbornly persistent, Nicholas, it seems you give me no choice but to destroy you. I might then add you to part of my meal with these other children," he said, gesturing to the cauldron, under which the fire had grown even bigger. The Krampus stood to his full height, now even more menacing than before. He started to walk towards Nicholas with his strange footsteps. Shuffle-clop, shuffle-clop, shuffle-clop. Nicholas stood and now found himself nearer to the cauldron with the 3 children. The spell on those children seemed to be breaking as they began to realize their dangerous situation, that they were in chains in a cauldron over the fire. They also noticed the Krampus menacingly walking their direction. Nicholas, aware that the children in the cauldron were in danger as the fire beneath it seemed to flare with the Krampus's anger, raised his spear and shield. And to prepare for this battle, in prayer he made the sign of the cross. As if in response, the golden cross on his shield blazed with a brilliant light. The Krampus was stunned and momentarily blinded as he stumbled back. It gave Nicholas time to rush to the cauldron, ramming it with his shield, and knocked it over. The cauldron clanked to the ground and rolled away from the fire, and the children tumbled out in a heap, baffled but unharmed. They then scrambled to the edge of the room out of harm's way. The Krampus had now recovered and gave a great roar of rage. He threw back his hood and threw aside his cloak, revealing his hideous figure. He had a dark, leathery face with sharp teeth and a snout like a goat's. He had curving horns coming out of his head, and his whole body was covered with ugly, dark and twisted fur that was matted and dirty. And the reason for the strange sound of his footsteps was clear now, for one foot looked like a bare human foot, though it was pitch black with curling claws, and the other foot was no foot at all, but was a great cloven hoof, like that of a giant goat. There was also a terrible stench that filled the room. The great and terrible Krampus snatched up the large cauldron and hurled it at Nicholas. Nicholas barely got his shield up in time to block it, but the force of the flying cauldron knocked Nicholas to the ground. The Krampus charged and leaped, intending to crush Nicholas with his cloven hoof. Nicholas rolled away just in time and got to his feet. He turned to see the Krampus charging him, and with a lowered head, attempted to drive Nicholas into the wall with great horns, but Nicholas again dodged just in time. The Krampus then rammed into the wall, sending flying chunks of ice and stone, but Nicholas knew now what he had to do. He took a deep breath and listened for the song of Caritas. He heard it easily now, loud and clear, and strength surged in him. At this time, when the Krampus charged him, he stood his ground and blocked and deflected the Krampus's blows with his sword and spear. And as he fought, he prayed. He realized that all his life he had been preparing for this battle. He was finally beginning to understand what Carrie had said earlier. The battle is not won by physical strength. He'd had no military training to prepare for this fight. Rather, all the time he had spent in prayer, on his knees in the church, prayers poured out in intercession for others, prayers of worship and wonder and awe, learned prayers, and the prayers of the movements of the divine liturgy, all were like his warrior's training to fight this beast, this manifestation of the darkness that sought to steal hope and joy from the hearts of the children. All this had strengthened him to battle this beast who lied and deceived and used the fears of children to convince them that they were not loved nor wanted. As Nicholas thought of all these children and all lost children, Basilios, those from the villages, all the children who had suffered, those of the orphanage, those in broken homes, all those children from times and generations yet to come, their pain, their suffering, and all the children to come, those he'd seen in the hall of ice mirrors, and more. His heart broke with love and compassion. His heart ached so much it was near to bursting. All the images shown in the Krampus's deceptive hall of ice mirrors went through his mind of all the people who had suffered. But when he saw all this, he united it with his prayer and with the song of Caritas. As he did so, his love for them and his compassion for their suffering did not weaken to helpless despair, as if he nearly had, in the hall of ice mirrors. Now he saw it all with a glimmer of hope, that despite all the pain, all the suffering and darkness, there was a glimmer of light shining in the darkness, like a guiding star. And no matter how much the darkness tried, it could not snuff out the light. He remembered the sacred words from Holy Writ. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness had not overcome it. And the words of this song, though he did not understand, the language he knew to be words that flowed from the one Word, the Word made flesh, who dwelt among us. And as you united each thought, each vision, each memory, each heartache with his prayer and with the song of Caritas, each of them, instead of making him feel weak and helpless, gave him strength. A fire surged in him, a blaze of divine love. Finally, after a ferocious battle of blows back and forth between Nicholas and the Krampus, Nicholas, with the fire of love blazing in him, struck down the Krampus. And with that holy spear of St. Longinus, the spear that was soaked with the precious blood of the incarnate light, and embedded with the sliver of the king's cross, he drove it through the Krampus's heart. As Nicholas drove this spear through the heart of the Krampus, Nicholas, filled with that song, then cried out and said, "You have been pierced by the very wood of the cross itself. And just as the incarnate light, through his death and demise, wrought the demise of death itself and the defeat of the enemy, just as he who through the holy rood wrought redemption from the condemnation of the cross that became the salvation of souls, so in this incredible inverse of the incarnate one, just as a reversal of the rood shall be wrought in you, O crooked and cruel Krampus, the wiles and wickedness you wield shall yield. You lurked as a demon in the dominion of darkness, servant of the shadow, worker of evil. No more, Krampus. Your mischief, which once served a malicious master, shall now serve a new master. No longer a master of malice, but the master of magnificence. All your ways will now serve only to drive people to the good. The fear you once struck in hearts shall now only drive hearts to fear of the Lord. You thought it better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven, but now the sentence you serve will be to only serve heaven. As the dog serves the shepherd in guiding the sheep, by barking and nipping at their heels to drive them to the right path, so shall you be to me, O Krampus. Instead of a hound of hell, you shall serve me as a hound of heaven, chasing children away from wickedness towards righteousness, away from darkness toward divine light, away from the road of perdition toward the road of salvation. May it be so, O Krampus, by the power of the peace that has pierced your heart." And as he spoke these words, the Krampus shrank and shriveled until he was no bigger than a large dog. And while he was ugly, with horns and hoof and sharp teeth, he no longer seemed scary, but looked silly and comical. Nicholas withdrew the spear, and the Krampus scrambled away, shrieking, and ran out of the cave into the wintry wilderness. And Nicholas knew the prophetic words he had spoken to be true. The Krampus was no more a threat. All the Krampus's attempts to scare children would now only be seen as comical and met with laughter. And any actual fear he might strike into the hearts of children would only inspire them to seek the incarnate light all the more, to pray more, and to love more. That the heavenly curse of the Krampus now was that all his attempts would only serve good.